One of the questions that we have to ask is why? Why do we do what we do? Why do we modify? And the simple answer is for enjoyment, for fun, for personal fulfillment. And those are all perfectly good reasons. Some cars lend themselves really well for these transformations. There are these hidden gems in the automotive space. And the Alltrack is a perfect example. It offers the practicality of a small SUV, but married to the drivetrain found in a much sportier Golf R. So come along on this journey of taking a softly sprung and underpowered factory Alltrack and polishing it into a much sharper and more engaging canyon carver. Yes, it'll still carry the kids and groceries, but by the journey's end, there'll be a lot more smiles to be had doing it. And that's all without having to settle for the tall, fun challenge vanilla SUV. And the best part? That it'll still hide its credentials just fine.
Welcome to Stratified, I'm Alex, this is
Clayton.
We've done some things to this car. We've made it a little bit faster than stock with tuning alone. What do you think we should also address?
Whiteline, Bilstein, SuperPro suspension parts, airbag, ECS, Dogbone mount, not product placement whatsoever.
No, we did buy all these products ourselves, so just having fun. Before you continue watching the fun we're about to have, make sure you hit that subscribe button because that makes sure that we continue making content and builds for you guys.
Well, the power that we added is fantastic. Going from that 146 to just under 200 on pump and then breaking that 200 barrier with ethanol, that was fantastic. The stock car handled its power well, but it's starting to feel sloppy going into corners. The Alltrack is supposed to be an off-roady type car. You don't want to take any golf product off-road. So it's nice to have the four-wheel drive and the DSG as well. Very similar to a Golf R, that's kind of the goal, but it's too tall and it's a bit sloppy. So ideally, we lower it and we stiffen up the suspension a little bit for the power that it has now.
Yeah, so very good points. Whenever we build something, and I think whenever a lot of you guys build something, you've got to start somewhere, right? And then as you kind of deal with that aspect and improve things in one area of the car, then some of the shortfalls start to be shown in other areas. So now with the additional power, we want to make this thing handle a little bit better, and we want to make it look a little bit better. So those are two of the reasons why a lot of people want to modify the suspension. What do you think about that? Should we slam it to the ground? It's got no wheels right now and it's on a hoist, so it looks lower than it really is.
That would be the ideal ride height, but I think that would require airbags. More work than we're prepared to do at the moment.
More work than we're prepared to do, and also whenever you make a choice, whenever you change something from stock and you throw on something in the aftermarket, then you're making a conscious decision to change some things and trade off in other areas, right? So we all agreed that this car, as we try to approach Golf R performance and exceed it eventually, we want to make sure that it does look good, but also that it handles and that you don't reduce the utility that you get from the Alltrack. So we've chosen a number of parts here to install on the car, and actually we're supposed to just do a rear sway bar, and that escalated. So we put in the rear suspension in the car already. So we're going backwards now and kind of talking about the parts and why we chose the parts. So first of all, the sway bar. So this is the stock sway bar that's already out of the car. It's a non-adjustable piece. Some people upgrade with a Golf R sway bar, and we upgraded with a Whiteline to get it in there because of the all-wheel drive system and the exhaust. You're gonna have to undo the control arms and so on, so we threw in the shocks. But the reason why you'd want to upgrade the sway bar is because as you're turning, your car is going to lean in one direction or the other, and the sway bar basically resists that body roll. In this car, there's quite a bit of body roll. Sway bars are not the only things that resist body roll. You've also got that from your springs, but these affect how much body roll you have, and and they do so without affecting ride quality at all. So it's one of the things that you can upgrade. Just be mindful of the handling characteristics that change as well. So a fat rear sway bar is going to have the rear end feel a lot more loose. It's going to have it come around on the braking, trail braking, and so on. And a fat front sway bar is going to essentially increase understeer. So we decided to go for the fat rear because these cars are very stable to begin with, and just give it a little bit more a rear end play. Now, to couple the sway bar, we also went with lowering springs. You can go with coilovers, you can go with airbags. I know that's a Clayton favorite, right? But actually, the Eibach kit for this car lowers it enough for the aesthetic, but also increases the stiffness of the spring. So now the car, when you're going into corners, again, roll resistance is going to be greatly reduced. The car is going to sit lower to the ground, center of gravity is going to be dropped, but it's not going to be dropped so much that you screw up the suspension geometry. So with these, we wanted to couple them with Bilstein shocks.
Bilstein.
The Bilstein shocks are shorter than stock and they handle increased spring rate. They also offer great dampening. I'm a big fan of KW and I'm a big fan of Bilstein. They do somewhere advertise on the shock that it's like Nordschleife tested. I've had them in numerous cars. I haven't had any cars on the Nordschleife, so I don't know. Is it really that good? But actually, a quality set of shocks really go a long way. You can stick springs on OEM shocks, but they do wear out faster. You do lose a little bit of traction. They're just not set up for an aftermarket spring. That covers the lowering, roll stiffness in the back, overall stiffness of the chassis, and the better dampening. But we went one step further with two more things that I really like to do. Most cars suffer from understeer. And what understeer is that you turn into a corner, and instead of turning into the corner, your car kind of pushes forward. In order to combat some of that, you want to change the geometry in the front. One of those things is to add camber. And this is what we're going to do with these
SuperPro suspension parts.
They're actually top mounts for the front shock and spring, and what they do is that they offset the position of the assembly so that it's tilted more inward. And when it's tilted more inward, you increase the camber in the front and you get more grip, especially on a McPherson strut car, which under load actually loses camber. So we're gonna give this car a bit more static camber. And finally, this is actually a rear Dogbone mount insert, just to reduce the drivetrain lash under acceleration, under gear shifts. You can find them from a whole bunch of vendors. It's a urethane insert, and this just reduces the fore-aft movement of the engine. I wanted to not get something super harsh in there. Once again, we want to balance the car out. We're not going to something super aggressive, but this setup here will make the car great around town, will make it handle really great in the canyons, and you might even be able to get this on track and have some fun lapping. I know a lot of sport wagons and GTIs and Golf Rs that use this kind of setup and they're just perfectly fine on track. So do you need coilovers? Do you need the adjustability? That's up to you. That's a discussion for perhaps another video, or you guys can talk about it in the comments. But we felt that for this car, we didn't need to raise and lower the car any further than what the springs do. The shock absorbers do a lot of the work to keep us on the road. The sway bar will help rotate the car. The front end will have more grip on the cornering. And we're about to continue this install, get it all aligned, and then show you guys some of the results.
At the end of the day, it's not a race car. It still has to be a daily driver. We're just looking for a little more out of it.
A lot more fun without too many drawbacks.
Yeah.
And if you guys have questions, so we have set up a whole bunch of cars with a whole bunch of different suspension setups. So if you got any questions, comments, hit us up. We'd love to chat with you why you may want to do this or something different on your car. So let's get to work.
Airbags.
Hopefully we'll not need to get to that. It'll be fun, they said, right? Yeah, that's the charcoal canister, and as you can see, I just need to remove it, one bolt. The bump stops on the Alltrack are designed for the springs that are on the Alltrack, and the problem with that is that now we're going to a lowering spring, and I just checked, these shocks do not have an internal bump stop. Now, just to give you an idea of how these sit, you can see that as you've installed this on the shock, you have very little travel until you bottom out. Now, keep in mind that the car is going significantly lower due to the lowering springs. So now if you were to try and get a similar assessment of the OEM shocks have a slightly longer shaft before you impact those bump stops. So what I'm going to do is to cut the bump stops, trim them, so that we have the additional shock travel here. I'm gonna make sure the shock doesn't bottom out. Okay, so now we've got our trimmed bump stops here for our lower height. Compress. There you go. And I don't expect these springs, they're not super low. I don't expect them to actually allow me to go that low. So it still offers a good amount of protection. I'm gonna put this cover back on to keep the dirt out. And use a new zap strap. You guys can see that the upper mount is ready to install here and nicely seated on there. And they do come with a new lock nut, Bilsteins. So they do say, do not impact this nut on. Your alternative to not impacting the nut on is to get an Allen key, put it in there, and just continue tightening this down. But you need a really offset wrench to do that. So we're going to have to work it a little bit with the impact. Make sure it doesn't bottom out. So now that you've got it near the bottom and up against the mount, you can use a hand tool to do your final tightening. The same on the other side. There's still a lot of tension, I was going to say, in that spring. Okay. Wow.
It was right at this moment that I realized I needed a brake. Not only had I almost impaled myself with the spring, but the headlight leveling sensor was sheared completely off. Tune in next time as we continue our adventures.